Mr. Justin Shu.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Together, Mr. Shu and I represent the United States government in this case. Your Honor, would you like to hear introduction from the defense counsel?
Yeah, let's get their appearances and then we'll do any pre-trial matters.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Ben Wallace, and I, along with my co-counsel, Ms. Gabrielle Warshak,
Good morning.
we collectively represent the defendant, Ms. Blake Crosby.
Good morning, Your Honor. Good morning. Do we have any housekeeping matters?
Yes, Your Honor. The government's actually prepared a bench book for your use in this proceeding. It just contains all the relevant documents for this case, such as the pre-trial order, stipulations agreed to by both sides, as well as a joint exhibit list. It also contains those exhibits. And the opposing counsel has seen this bench book. May we approach and tender?
Sure. Thank you very much.
Of course. Your Honor, we'd also like to note that we'll have a party representative joining us throughout the course of trial. We're joined here at council table today by agents Morgan DeVico.
Good morning, Your Honor. Good morning.
And Your Honor, because this is the first time that we've served in your court, we just want to know a couple of your preferences. Should we ask permission when approaching opposing counsel, the opposing witness, or the bench?
You don't need to ask permission. Your courtroom, go wherever you want. Just don't get too close to me.
Of course, Your Honor. And maybe consider all objections heard constructively outside the earshot of the jury.
That's fine.
And when those objections are sustained, should we move to strike or consider the offending testimony already stricken?
That I'm gonna leave that up to you. If you think it's something you want stricken, then move to strike. If not, I'm gonna assume that it hasn't been stricken.
Of course, Your Honor. With that, the government's ready to go.
That's good.
Your Honor, we just have one clarifying matter. We also have a party representative, Ms. Blake Crosby, who will be staying with us throughout the duration of today's proceedings.
Sounds good.
And with that, Your Honor, defense is full ready to go.
Okay. Ready for openings or
Yes, Your Honor.
let's hear it?
May I please report? Mr. Wallace. Members of the jury. Follow the defendant. From the reservation to the rooftop. To the record. It's the 4th of July. 1:45 p.m. And Senator Tom Capello is walking up to greet the public. He's on his 4th stop of his presidential campaign. He steps up to the podium, smiles. He waves to the people watching from behind the camera. Less than 90 seconds later, out there's a bang. They drop to their knees and they're covering their heads and they're forced to watch as Senator Capello falls to the ground. He's been killed. That's why we're here because we're going to prove that the defendant, Blake Crosby, was the person who fired that shot. What you're going to hear today is that Blake Crosby was an award-winning sniper. Was exactly where she needed to be to take that shot. And that she wanted Senator Capello dead. You'll hear that months before July 4th ever happened, she was sitting in her house booking hotel rooms and flights to get close to Senator. You'll hear that she flew across the country, followed him from state to the stage he was killed. And that's why we charged the defendant with murder. But with that, there's a couple of things that we have to prove. First, we have to prove to you today that Blake Crosby was the one who killed Senator Capello on the 4th of July. Second, we have to prove that to you that it was intentional. Now, both of these things we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's exactly what we'll do. And we'll do that today by asking that you come with us as we follow the defendant. From the reservation to the rooftop to the records. So first, that reservation. Today, you're going to hear that the defendant was staying in a hotel that had a direct line of sight from where the Senator Capello was going to be. A Secret Service agent will take the stand and tell you that their forensics team narrowed that shooter down to one building and one building only. You'll hear the defendant called ahead. that she used a fake name, that she requested the top floor and the one closest to the emergency staircase. A staircase that gave her access to number 2, the rooftop. Today, you're going to hear from that Secret Service agent that on that rooftop, they found a cigarette with gunshot residue and the defendant's DNA. Feet away. A bullet. The same type of bullet that was used to kill Senator Capello. You'll hear that an eyewitness placed the defendant walking up the staircase to that rooftop an hour before Senator Capello was shot. So last, we'll go to the records. Because today you'll hear the defendant has an extensive military record. That over and over and over again, she was winning awards for being a better shot than anyone else in the military. You'll hear she holds records. You'll hear today that she did not like how Senator Capello spoke about the military. You'll hear she made death threats to him. Now, members of the jury, a lot of information is going to be thrown into your deck. The opposing counsel is about to get up here and tell you their own story, their own version of the facts. Don't let the defense distract you. Because if you continue to follow the defendant from the reservation to the rooftop to those records, this story becomes incredibly clear. And that's why at the end of this trial, I'll come before you again. And I'll ask that you find the defendant guilty of murder. Thank you.
Thank you. Opening statement from defense.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed? Their story doesn't make sense. You see, members of the jury, Mr. Walker, he just came before me, and he explained to you a crime that will be written about in textbooks far after this trial has ended. See, there's no doubt that on July 4th, 2022, Thomas Capello was murdered in cold blood. And this nation was made victim because of it. But it's exactly that. The magnitude of this assassination that makes it so important that the prosecution gets it right. That they do an investigation that uncovers so much evidence, that makes so much sense, that neither you nor the future generations of students who study this crime would have any reason to doubt their story. Which the jury, it upsets me to tell you today, that's not what you're going to hear. Because when you take a closer look at the story Mr. Walker told you, that he's alleging the killer was both a madman and a mastermind, that story just doesn't make sense. Members of the jury, let me introduce you to the woman at the center of this story. This is Blake Crosby. He's an American. He's a veteran. And members of the jury, when she walked into this courtroom, she was an innocent woman. As the judge will explain to you, she will remain an innocent woman for the rest of her life. Unless, at the end of today's trial, when you go back into deliberation, you are so convinced by the prosecution's story, and not a single one of you hesitates to convict. As the jury, we don't believe that will happen today. Because the prosecution won't meet their burden of proving this crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And to help you see that, to help you see how the prosecution's story just doesn't make sense, we want you to focus on 3 key phases of that story. What happened before the assassination, what happened during it, and what happened after. So let's break that down, starting with what happened before the assassination. Because members of the jury, with a crime of this magnitude, assassinating a political candidate, you'd expect to see some red flags in Ms. Crosby's past. concerning family members, alarming internet history, something would indicate she was deranged enough to assassinate a political candidate in broad daylight. But we expect you won't hear a single indicator that Miss Crosby was preparing to commit the crime of the century. Which turns us to that second fact. What happened during the assassination? Because members of the jury, the story Mr. Walker tells you about Miss Crosby staring down the scope of a rifle on top of a rooftop just doesn't make sense. Because we'll expect you'll hear from a witness that verifies Miss Crosby's alibi. That what she was doing on July 4th was in a crowd of protesters cheering against Mr. Capello. Nothing wrong at all. That turns us to that third phase. What happened after this crime? Because members of the jury, the punishment Miss Crosby faces, you learn it would make someone run or hide. Members of the jury, you'll learn today that after this crime, Miss Crosby, she didn't go to a foreign country. She didn't try to hide from the police. No, members of the jury, she went home. Back to work, just like she had planned to do. You see, members of the jury, we understand. We understand how we want someone to blame for this attack on American democracy. We should want even more for that person to be the right one. Jury, that's why at the end of this trial, we are confident that you'll realize the prosecution hasn't brought you the right sort of person because their story just doesn't make sense. That's why we'll ask that you come back with the only verdict supported by justice, a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Walker, call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Before we do so, we'd like to enter two pieces of evidence into evidence. First, we'd like to enter exhibit number 9. And pursuant to stipulation, both parties have agreed this can come in without objection, so long as the witness named Barbara Edwards is not present.
Is that your understanding?
Yes, Your Honor, our agreement with the stipulation.
Okay, then it's in.
Your Honor, in addition to that one, in that same stipulation, exhibit number 17 is also admissible without objection.
Any objection, or is that as you understand it?
No, Your Honor, that's how we understand it.
Okay, exhibit 17 is also admitted.
Your Honor, at this time, the government calls Agent Morgan DeVica to stand.
Good.
May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Yes, my name is Morgan DeVica. I'm a special agent in charge of the protection unit for the United States Secret Service.
Ma'am, how long have you been working?
I've been working for the Secret Service since after college, so about 20 years. I graduated from the University of Chicago with a degree in criminal justice and applied for the Secret Service immediately after.
So what kind of experience do you have from the past 20 years working?
Sure. I started off just in the Secret Service, then I became a special agent, and then eventually I was promoted to the special agent in charge of the protection unit. In my experience, I've worked on investigations detailing protections of political candidates, and I've also worked on investigations with forensic evidence and investigations including the FBI.
How are you involved in this case?
I'm involved in this case because I was present for the shooting of Senator Thomas Capello on July 4th, 2022.
Ma'am, I want to go back and talk about what happened today. What time was Senator Capello shot?
Senator Capello was shot at 1:47 p.m. on July 4th.
What was your first reaction?
My first reaction was to pull out my weapon and scan the crowd for a shooter and to scan the buildings. They were all empty, so I turned around and with the rest of the agents, we checked on Senator Capello, who unfortunately was killed instantaneously.
Ma'am, after the assassination, were you and your team able to pinpoint where that shooter had been?
After the investigation, yes. At first, it was chaos, and because we located nobody in the buildings, we presumed that the shot was coming from afar given the sound of the gunshot. And after the investigation, we narrowed it down to one location.
Where was that one location?
The Sonesta Hotel.
So ma'am, I want to make sure that this story makes sense. What evidence do you have that connected this case to the defendant, Blake Crosby?
Upon our investigation with the FBI, Secret Service and the FBI did a joint investigation. We collected eyewitness account of where Blake Crosby was at the time of the shooting, leading up to the shooting. We collected evidence of where Blake Crosby was staying, which ended up being at the Sonesta Hotel during that week of July 4th. And we also found evidence on the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel.
Well, ma'am, I want to follow the defendant and take those one at a time. You mentioned the hotel. Do you know if the defendant had made a reservation at that hotel?
Yes, the defendant did make a reservation at the Sonesta Hotel, and that was verified through the hotel clerk, Harper Edwards, who collected the ID for Blake Crosby who checked in, except interestingly enough, Blake Crosby checked in under the name Pat Henry to the hotel.
Ma'am, would you recognize a copy of that reservation list that you saw today?
Yes, I would.
Do you see that binder in front of you?
Yes,
If you could flip to what's been pre-marked and labeled as exhibit number 9. Your Honor, this is already in it.
I'm there.
Ma'am, is this that reservation list?
Yeah,
Do you see someone named Pat Henry on there?
I do.
What does the note say for next to the defendant's reservation?
The note for the defendant's reservation says requested room next to emergency stairwell.
So ma'am, if you had evidence that the defendant was staying at this hotel, did you have evidence that they had been up on the rooftop?
We did. It was confirmed through Harper Edwards, again, the clerk at Hotel Sonesta, that they had seen Blake Crosby on the stairwell on July 4th, going up to the rooftop.
Well, ma'am, let's go ahead and move from the reservation up onto that rooftop. Did you go?
Yes, on July 5th, 2022, the FBI and the Secret Service then went to the Sonesta Hotel, given the tip that we had gotten of seeing Blake Crosby in the stairwell. And when we were at the rooftop, we found a bunch of evidence that corroborated Blake Crosby as a suspect and now the defendant in this case.
Objection, Your Honor, to lack of foundation. If you'd like, I can explain.
Sure.
Your Honor, the witness just said we found a bunch of evidence that corroborated that Miss Crosby was on that rooftop. We have no idea what that evidence is. The witness can't state a blanket statement. They found a bunch of evidence without first laying the foundations to what that evidence is.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. My next question to the agent was going to be, what evidence did you find on the roof? That foundation is going to be laid.
Okay, overruled, assuming if he doesn't lay the foundation, feel free to erase it.
Yeah.
Yes, Your Honor. Agent, what did you find on the rooftop of the defendant's hotel?
First, we found a cigarette butt. When we tested the cigarette butt, we found a fingerprint. That fingerprint was a match for Blake Crosby.
What else did you find?
We also found just 4 feet away from that cigarette butt, a bullet, the same one that matched the bullet that struck Senator Capello in the head on the 4th of July.
Well, ma'am, what kind of skills would it take for someone to be able to shoot from the top of that hotel to the stage where Senator Capello was?
Based on my review of Blake Crosby's interview with the FBI director, based on their own words, it takes somebody with training and experience in sniper.
Objection, Your Honor, to an improper opinion, if you like, I can explain.
Sure.
Your Honor, to testify even to Miss Crosby's statements that they're scientifically valid, that job would take expertise, that's a scientific conclusion that we haven't heard Miss Crosby has the qualifications for, and we certainly haven't heard that the special agent has qualifications for.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. She's just relaying what the defendant believed to be true in that statement. Based on the defendant's words saying it's because someone would need that training and skill, that's how they would be able to do that. And furthermore, my next question was going to ask about the defendant's ability to identify that same fact.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, we take particular issue with the question that Mr. Walker asked, which what kind of skill would it take to make that shot? He didn't ask what did the defendant say about that skill. He asked the expert to give a conclusion, and we haven't heard foundation for that.
Yeah, I understand your objection. I'm gonna sustain it as far as the opinion being asked. Feel free to rephrase your question as to what the defendant in fact said. But as far as the question you were asked requesting an opinion, I'm gonna sustain that.
Yes, Your Honor.
Motion to strike until that foundation is laid. Yes, Your Honor.
Agent, what did the defendant say? when you asked them specifically about what skills it would take to shoot from that rooftop?
The defendant said that it would take an experienced and skilled sniper to shoot from that distance. Additionally, that no ordinary person could do it, not even a trained law enforcement agent in firearms.
Did you ask the defendant about what training they might have had?
Yes, we found that the defendant had a military record.
Well, I want to move from that rooftop to that military record. Would you recognize a copy of it if I showed it to you?
Yes,
If you could flip to exhibit number 14.
and there,
Ma'am, is this that military record that you have?
yes, it is.
Is it fair and accurate?
It appears to be.
Has it been changed or altered?
It is not.
Your Honor, at this time, the government offers exhibit number 14, and if we needed to, Your Honor, if necessary, we can redact everything from the third paragraph on due to improper propensity evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, we object pursuant to 404 improper character evidence to the latter half about Ms. Crosby in some sort of lying allegation.
If we have that section redacted, do you have any issue with it then?
Just to be clear, Your Honor, is it just the awards won by Ms. Crosby as a sniper, nothing about relying on her political opinions?
Your Honor, we're only concerned with the first two paragraphs listed under remark. That third paragraph, fourth and fifth, we're fine redacting that from the record.
Yes, Your Honor, we're perfectly fine with redacting this third, fourth, and fifth paragraph per character.
Okay, so the paragraph starting with served, dishonorable, and altercation are all redacted. Everything else is okay coming in, Mr. Wallace?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, then it's admitted with those redacted.
Yes, Your Honor. Agent, when you reviewed the defendant's military record, what did you find they were able to do?
Well, we found that the defendant was a sharpshooter, essentially. He was very good at what he did. He won competitions in 2010, 2013, 2014, and 2016, all sniper competitions. Additionally, as of 2017, Blake Crosby held the U.S. Armed Forces record with a bullseye from over 1,500 yards away.
Ma'am, how far was it from the top of that rooftop to the stage where the senator had been shot?
About 600 yards.
Thank you, ma'am. You can go ahead and close that line. Throughout the course of your investigation, did you find any reason that the defendant might have to kill Senator Capello?
Yes, we found a number of social media posts about the defendant's disdain for Senator Capello and his policies.
So, Agent, after you followed the defendant from that reservation to that rooftop to those military records, what did you do?
We arrested Blake Crosby.
Thank you for your time today. Your Honor, at this time, I have nothing further.
Thank you. Ross?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning, Special Agent.
Good morning.
I want to begin by being very clear about the seriousness of the crime you're accusing Ms. Crosby of committing. Because, ma'am, you consider this a political assassination, right?
I sure do. And because of that, we took this very seriously in every step of the investigation, as you have to do with these high-profile cases.
Now, ma'am, Mr. Capello, he was your man to protect, right?
Yes, I was in charge of the protection detail that day on July 4th.
So, of course, you want to find out who killed him.
Of course.
So, like you just mentioned, you took this investigation very seriously.
Yes,
In your own words, ma'am, you flipped over every rock, you shook every tree, right?
we did.
So, of course, you combed through every single aspect. You looked at her behavior before this assassination.
Yep, the military record.
You looked at her behavior during the assassination.
Yes,
You looked at her behavior after this assassination.
of course.
But, ma'am, I want to walk through each of those three factors one by one. Let's start with her behavior before the assassination. Because, ma'am, of course, when you were searching for Ms. Crosby as a suspect, you spoke to some of her family members, right?
We interviewed several witnesses in this case. We did not speak to Blake Crosby's family members, no. We based it off the military record, which presented signs that Ms. Crosby had a history of violence and lying that she was dishonorably discharged.
Ma'am, I'm not asking you about violence or lying. I'm asking you, did you speak to the family members of Ms. Crosby about her behavior before the assassination?
No, we did not speak to Ms. Crosby's family about her behavior before.
So you have no idea if she had concerning behavior before the assassination?
I would disagree with that. The concerning behavior was found in the military report. that stated that Blake Crosby had been dishonorably discharged from the U.S. Army.
Your Honor, motion to strike that portion of the exhibit was redacted.
Response?
Your Honor, it's understanding that portion is redacted as well.
Okay.
So, ma'am, to be clear, you found nothing concerning regarding Miss Crosby's family, right?
Not regarding Ms. Crosby's family, no.
So, of course, you also looked through her bank statements, the days leading up to the assassination, right?
No, we did not look into Blake Crosby's bank statements.
So, to be clear, you have no idea if she bought ammunition leading up to that assassination.
We don't have any receipts from ammunition purchases, no. But what we do know is that Blake Crosby also had a fake ID and went under the alias Pat Henry.
Ma'am, I wasn't asking you about a fake ID. I was asking you whether or not the defendant bought ammunition, and you don't know if she did.
Under the name Blake Crosby, we found no evidence of that.
Since you didn't look at their bank statements, you can't tell us if Blake Crosby bought a sniper rifle leading up to that assassination.
Under the name Blake Crosby, no.
Ma'am, of course, looking into someone who committed the assassination of a political figure, you had to have looked at their phone too, right?
Yes, depending on the investigation.
You didn't look at their text messages, did you?
We did not look into the text messages of Blake Crosby and other people, no.
Didn't look at their GPS data?
No, but we have eyewitness testimony that places Blake Crosby throughout the day on July 4th.
Didn't look at their internet history?
No.
So ma'am, to be clear, you have no idea if Miss Crosby talked to anyone leading up to that assassination?
I would disagree with that. We have eyewitness testimony of who Blake Crosby talked to on July 3rd and July 4th.
Ma'am, to be clear, you have no idea if Miss Crosby texted anyone days leading up to that assassination?
Texted anybody? No.
Ma'am, to be clear, you have no idea if Miss Crosby's GPS data would place her in the location of that crowd, right?
Not specifically GPS data, but again, eyewitness statements who placed Blake Crosby at and around the scene of the crime the day before and the day of the shooting.
So Special Agent, I want to be clear. In investigating someone who assassinated a presidential candidate, you didn't talk to their family, look at their bank records, or look at their phone at all.
As I stated before, no, we didn't take those steps, but there was other evidence in this case that led us to believe that Blake Crosby was at the scene of the crime.
Well, then let's talk about some of that evidence, because you talked a lot about a eyewitness's testimony, Ms. Harper Edwards, right?
Yes,
I want to clarify what you told us. On direct examination, ma'am, you told us that you saw that Harper Edwards saw Miss Crosby going up to the rooftop. That's what you said, right?
yes,
To be clear, ma'am, what Miss Harper Edwards saw was someone who went to the rooftop and then returned to their room, right?
I see where the confusion is. To be very clear, Harper Edwards' statement is that she saw someone in the stairwell and that someone she later identified as Blake Crosby told Harper Edwards that they were going up to the roof to smoke a cigarette.
They went back to their room after that, right, ma'am? That's what Miss Edwards said.
She believes that she saw them go back into the room, yes.
All right, ma'am, I want to move on and talk about evidence that you have of Miss Crosby's behavior during that assassination.
Okay,
Because, ma'am, you'd agree with me, you told us a lot about a cigarette that you found at the shooting site, right?
yes, that had a fingerprint that matched Blake Crosby,
Exactly, it had Blake Crosby's DNA on it.
yes.
Ma'am, you also found a few other pieces of evidence throughout this trial, right? Or throughout your investigation, right?
Absolutely.
You
That's
found-
how we were able to link Blake Crosby to this crime.
You found a bullet, right?
Yes,
To be clear, ma'am, that bullet had no DNA on it.
no DNA evidence was recovered from the bullet, but it was the same bullet that matched the one found in Senator Capello's skull.
No forensics.
No forensics from that bullet, no.
You found a component of a sniper rifle in a trash can, right?
Yes, we recovered the trigger guard from a trash can near where Blake Crosby had lunched on July 4th.
No DNA,
No DNA on the trigger guard, no.
no forensics.
No forensics on the trigger guard.
Ma'am, to be clear, the FBI and the CIA, or the FBI and the Secret Service, they have yet to recover the rest of that sniper rifle.
That is true.
So I want to be crystal clear about what you expect the members of this jury to believe. That the person who committed this crime was able to hide a gun from the FBI and the Secret Service, but left a cigarette with their DNA? That's what you expect them to believe.
Well, what I would expect to be believed is the truth of what happened and the evidence that there is to back that up. What we have to understand is that Blake Crosby was a trained sniper. Certainly, and admittedly by Blake Sniper, she was able to construct and deconstruct the type of sniper used in about 60 seconds. from her own statement. That's what she said. So as a trained sniper, having that experience and that skill, that is a portion of the evidence that pointed us to believe that Blake Crosby committed this crime.
Ma'am, I want to be clear. You're expecting the members of the jury to believe that Blake Crosby was able to break down that sniper rifle in 60 minutes, hide it all over the city, but was stupid enough to leave a cigarette with her DNA. That's what you expect them to do.
Not 60 minutes, 60 seconds is how long it would have taken to construct and deconstruct the sniper, to be very clear. And secondly, yes, and I'm not expecting them to believe it. I'm just expecting that we present the evidence and that the jury considers the evidence that we had to accuse Blake Crosby of this crime.
Thank you, Special Agent. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Agent, a moment ago, Mr. Wallace got up here and asked about before, during, and after that event. Let's start with the before. Before the assassination on July 4th, did you find any concerning social media posts by the defendant?
We did. We found 2 Twitter posts that led us to believe that Blake Crosby not only disliked the political candidate, but that was threatening the political candidate's life.
Let's move on to during then, because Mr. Wallace asked about an eyewitness. What did that eyewitness say?
Harper Edwards said to us that she saw Blake Crosby, later identified Blake Crosby as a person in the stairwell, and that Blake Crosby had said that she was going to the rooftop for a cigarette.
Let's talk about what happened after, when you found that cigarette. Was it just the defendant's DNA that you found on that cigarette on the beach?
No, we also found gun residue from the same gun that matches the style of rifle used to assassinate Senator Capello on that cigarette butt with Blake Crosby's fingerprint.
Thank you, ma'am. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any recrawl?
No, Your Honor.
You're excused. Does the government have any other witnesses or evidence?
No, Your Honor. At this time, the government rests its case in chief.
Okay, defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Before we call our first witness, similar to the prosecution, we want to move to admit exhibit number 18, Your Honor. Similar to Harper Edwards, it's a statement by Ray Judd. Both sides have waived all objections pursuant to stipulation 18.
Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay, 18's in.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Blake Crosby to the stand.
Crosby, you're sworn in.
May I proceed?
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hello, everyone. My name is Blake Crosby.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, ma'am.
Yes, sir. I was born and raised in Georgia, just 40 minutes out of Atlanta. Family's still there. I served for about 8 years, and after I was discharged, I jumped from job to job, just trying to make ends meet.
And I want to be upfront about this. On July 4th, 2022, did you kill a politician named Thomas Capello?
No, sir, I did not kill Thomas Capello.
And have you been here throughout today's trial?
I have. I've been sitting at the defense counsel table.
Ma'am, when Special Agent DeVito told the members of the jury that you had worked in the Army and used those skills to commit this crime, can you tell the jury how long you worked in it?
Yes, sir. I was in the military for about 8 years. As you can tell from my stature, I was not put on the front lines, but I was a sniper for all 8 years.
When they accused you of shooting Thomas Capello, do you even own a sniper rifle?
No, sir, I haven't touched a sniper rifle since I was discharged about 6 years ago.
To be clear, ma'am, when was the last time that you shot a sniper?
At least 6 years ago.
Ma'am, a moment ago, Special Agent DeVito said that you could make a shot consistently at 20 or 1,500 yards. Do you still do that?
I doubt it, sir. It's been a long time since I picked up one of those rifles. I don't think I could shoot it from that far.
Right, Ms. Crosby. Now that we have an understanding of the prosecution's side of the story, I give you the chance to explain yours. Let's start with Philadelphia, 2022. And why'd you come to the city?
Well, I flew to Philadelphia to protest Senator Capello's rallies. We didn't agree politically and I wanted to express that, so I flew out to watch some of his campaigns.
Well, ma'am, when did you arrive in Philadelphia?
I got to Philly on July 3rd, a day before the rally on July 4th.
Where'd you stay?
I stayed at the Sonesta. I think it's a few blocks from here.
Ma'am, you were in trial today when Special Agent DeVico told us you used a fake name registered under that hotel. Can you tell us why you did that?
Yes, sir. I'm not sure if it's from my time in the military, but I typically prefer my privacy. It's something that I do when I stay at hotels.
So to be clear, you've done that before, ma'am. It wasn't just Philadelphia.
Oh, yes, sir. Philadelphia was not the first time I did it.
And now, did you ever speak to the police in this trial about what you did in that hotel?
Yes, sir. The police questioned me after Senator was shot.
They asked you if you ever went onto that rooftop?
They did.
What'd you say?
Initially, I told them I never went up there. I know that I didn't do what they think I did, and I didn't want it to look like I did, but I know now that was not the right thing to do. And I'm sorry for it.
And I want to be clear, when did you go to the rooftop of that hotel?
It's a nasty habit of mine, but I'm a smoker, and on July 3rd, day before the rally, I went up to the rooftop for a smoke.
And I'm going to give you a chance to give an explanation to the members of the jury about what happened that day. What were you doing on July 4th, 2022?
Well, sir, that was the day of the rally, so I had woken up about 5 a.m., went for my normal morning routine, and got to the rally at about 1 p.m.
Ma'am, I showed you a map of downtown Philadelphia. Would you be able to show us where in that rally you were?
Yes, sir, that the FBI actually showed me that map, and I showed them too.
Then could you open up that exhibit? It should be exhibit number 3. Let me know when you get it.
I'm there, sir.
Ma'am, exhibit number 3, what is it?
This is the map of the surrounding area where the rally was that I was shown by the FBI.
Fair and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
It looks the same as when I was last shown.
Does it appear changed or altered in any way?
No, sir.
Your Honor, the defense moves exhibit 3 in that.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 3 is in.
Your Honor, permission to publish to the jury.
Go ahead.
You want to read a set of these exhibits, permission to give one each.
Absolutely.
Ma'am, looking at this document, can you point out to the members of the jury where you were in that rally? You can show it to me.
Yes, sir. Right where it says Rittenhouse Square, to the right of that square, I was standing where it says park. Right when the senator was shot.
And you mentioned that you were at a rally. Were there other people near you?
Tens of thousands, sir. It was a big rally.
Ma'am, could you flip to exhibit number 18 in that book? Let me know when you get it. Your Honor, this document is already in evidence. Permission to publish it to the jury.
Sure.
There we go.
Okay, sir.
Dan, would you mind reading lines 34 to 36 for the members of the jury?
Yes, sir. On July 4th, I saw Crosby at the Capello event. I didn't talk to Crosby. I just saw Crosby at Rittenhouse Square in the crowd of protesters. I don't remember what Crosby was wearing. I can't tell you what time I saw Crosby, except it must have been after I got there at 10 a.m.
Then can you read that last sentence starting at "but I'm one" on line 38?
Yes, sir, but I'm 100% sure I saw Crosby at the Capello rally on July 4th, 2022.
Ma'am, have you ever met the name listed on the top of that, Gray Judd?
No, sir, I don't know a gray judge.
Were you friends?
No, certainly not.
And you mentioned that you were at that rally. Can you tell us what time Mr. Capello was shot?
It was, right around 1:45.
How did you handle it?
No, I was in the military, but seeing a civilian getting shot, especially out of nowhere, you don't get used to that. I was pretty shaken up.
Did you go home after that night?
I walked around Philadelphia for a little bit, just trying to get my head straight, but eventually I went back to the hotel to pack up and catch my flight back to Los Angeles.
And when you were in Los Angeles, did you hide from the police?
No, sir, I didn't.
Did you talk to them?
I did. I was approached for questioning, and so I agreed.
Was it voluntary?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
What happened after you spoke to the police?
I was arrested.
And the charge they brought against you? Did you commit it?
No, I did not kill Senator Thomas Capello.
For your time, Ms. Crosby. Nothing further.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, sir.
I want to start off by talking about the interview that you had with the FBI.
Okay.
If you could go ahead and flip to exhibit number 19 in that book. So lines 94.
I'm there, sir.
Now, I just want to, I'm going to ask you the questions that the FBI asked you in that interview, and I want you to tell the members of the jury whether or not it was the truth or if it was a lie.
Okay, sir.
Question: have you ever been on this route?
My answer, when they first asked, was a lie, sir.
Question: did you go to the Sonesta rooftop during your stay?
Yes, sir. My answer was a lie.
Ma'am, you then went on to and lied to the FBI about 3 more times, right?
That's right, sir. I'm not proud of it, but that's right.
Ma'am, it's true that you told them a lie because you thought that the truth made you look guilty, right?
That's right. I didn't think it would look good to tell them that I was up on that roof, but I know what I said was wrong.
So ma'am, it wasn't until they showed you forensic evidence, proof that you were on that roof, that you told the truth.
Yes, that's when I told them everything. I was on the roof and I smoked that cigarette on July 3rd.
Well, let's go ahead and let's talk about the story you're telling today and whether or not it makes any sense. But let's start before the crime. Because you actually booked your reservation for that hotel 3 months before Senator Capello was shot, right?
Yes, sir. On April 5th, when he released his campaign schedule, that's when I booked my flight.
Ma'am, you flew out to Boston,
Yes, I flew out to Boston and got a rental car to drive to Philadelphia.
and 3 months before Senator Capello was killed on July 4th, you already had a flight booked home on that same day.
Yes, sir. I wanted to make a trip out of it. I wanted to protest at multiple rallies, so I went to Boston and Philadelphia and planned to fly home after that.
So ma'am, that's a yes to my question. That you booked a flight home from Philadelphia for the day that Senator Capello had been shot.
It ended up being that day, sir. Yes.
Well, let's go ahead and let's talk about the reservation you made at the hotel. Because ma'am, you used a fake name, didn't you?
Yes, I like to keep my name private, so I booked it under Pat Henry.
Ma'am, you called ahead, didn't you?
I did. That's right.
You asked for a room on the top floor.
Yes, I did.
You asked for the room closest to an emergency staircase.
Yes, sir. I like to be close to the stairwell in the case of an emergency. I've been through some things.
Ma'am, it's true, that staircase. It's only feet away from the rooftop that you lied to the FBI about, right?
It was feet away from the stairwell. That's right.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that rooftop, because you've been here all the trial, haven't you?
Yes, sir. I have.
Ma'am, you know, they found a cigarette and a bullet on that rooftop.
Yes, that's what the FBI told me.
Ma'am, you'd recognize them fresh over to you.
I would, sir. Yes.
Your Honor, at this time we're approaching opposing counsel with exhibit 5 and exhibit 7.
Okay.
Permission to approach the witness.
Yes.
Ma'am, the witness the same. Ma'am, you recognize these, don't you?
Yes, this is the bullet and the cigarette butt that the FBI showed me.
Let's go ahead and let's start with that cigarette. Because you were here when the agent told us that your fingerprints were found on that same cigarette. right?
Yes, that's right.
You were here when the agent told us that gunshot residue was also found on that same cigarette, right?
Yes, that's what I heard the agent say.
And you were here when that agent told us that that cigarette was feet away from the bullet, right?
Yes, sir, I heard that.
Well, let's go ahead and talk a bit more about that bullet, because you've seen it before, haven't you?
Yes, sir, I will show me.
Man, you recognize it almost immediately.
Yes, I will.
And this is the bullet that you shot while you were in the army, right?
Yes, when I was a sniper, this was a bullet that was commonly used.
Let's go ahead and talk about your record of being in the military.
Okay?
Because you believe that no ordinary sniper could have made the shot on Senator Capella, right?
I wouldn't say no ordinary sniper, but no ordinary civilian.
You think that they would have had to be extremely trained or skilled at what they did.
Yes, sir, you would need training to use a sniper rifle, that's right.
Now, you're trained to use a sniper rifle, aren't you?
I was, yes, sir.
Yeah, you're pretty good at it too, aren't you?
I was when I was in the military. I couldn't tell you how I would do now.
Now, it's true that for 4 different years, you actually won competitions from how good of a sniper you are.
That's right, sir. When I was in the military, I worked hard.
Man, you actually hold a record from how far you can shoot. Isn't that true?
That's true, yes, sir.
Man, you can shoot a sniper from that 1,500 yards, right?
In my prime, I could, but I couldn't tell you how I could do it now.
Man, it's true that the distance between that rooftop and that stage was only 600, right?
That's what I was told, sir, yes.
Now, I want to talk about something else we have on the record. Because you mentioned earlier that you booked your flight and reservations on April 5th. Really?
Yes, that's right.
You also posted on social media, didn't you?
Yes, I use my Twitter to post my political beliefs.
Your Honor, this time I'm approaching and posting on Twitter, copy of the exhibit file. Ma'am, if you could flip to exhibit 12 in that binder,
Yes, sir.
let me know when you're ready.
I'm there, sir.
Ma'am, this is a tweet you made that same day.
Yes, it is.
It's fair and accurate.
Yes, sir.
Hasn't been changed.
It looks the same as when I last saw it.
Your Honor, government offers exhibit number 12.
Any objections?
No objection, Your Honor.
It's in.
Now, I want to go through what you said in this tweet. Permission to publish some copies of the members of the jury.
Sure.
Because Ms. Crosby, this is the same day that Senator Capello released his tour schedule, right?
Yes, sir, this was that same day.
Same day you booked your hotel,
Yes, when I made my trip to the East Coast.
same day you booked the flight away from Philadelphia.
Yes, sir, to Boston and from Philadelphia to Los Angeles.
Now, in this tweet, you say that Senator Capello is a threat to everyone, but don't you?
Yes, I do.
You say as long as he is alive, nobody is safe, right?
Yes, sir, that's what I said.
Thank you for your time today, ma'am. Your Honor, at this time I have nothing further. Permission to approach and grab exhibit 5 and 7 and
Sure.
approach the jury.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Ma'am, I want to be clear about what you could do before and during that assassination with a sniper. Mr. Walker asked if you could shoot a target dead on from 1,500 yards. Can you do that now?
Sir, it has been at least 6 years since I've even touched a sniper rifle. I don't believe I could shoot from that far at this point.
Ma'am, could you have used this bullet to shoot 600 yards from a sniper on July 5th?
I didn't even have a rifle with me. I don't own one. I couldn't have done that.
Thank you for your time, ma'am. Nothing further. Permission to read public.
Assuming no recross,
No recross, Your Honor.
you didn't set that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Any other evidence from defense?
No, Your Honor, defense rests its case.
Okay, anything we have to do before closings?
No, Your Honor, we're ready to go.
Okay, closing argument with the done.
And go ahead and retrieve exhibit 12 from the jury as well. May I proceed?
You may.
As long as he is alive, No one's safe. Members of the jury, there's one thing I noticed as we went through this case. And so there's a couple things in the defense's story that doesn't make sense. And they know that. And that's because they chose to keep a few things out. Let's take a look at the piece of evidence that they brought to the table and read what they didn't want you to hear. It must have been after 10 a.m. and before the shooting. I took about a dozen group photos with the other protesters, but when I went back and looked at those photos, Crosby wasn't in them. Members of the jury, that witness told you herself. I don't know who this person is. This isn't a verification of an alibi. It's a distraction. Follow the defendant. From the reservation, made 3 months before Senator Capello was killed, where the defendant followed him from state to the stage he was killed. To the roof, where they found a cigarette with gunshot residue and the defendant's DNA feet away from the same type of bullet that killed that senator. To the right, the defendant's expertise with guns that showed her winning award for being a better shot than anyone. Because when you follow the defendant, this case becomes extremely clear. And that's why we charged her with murder. But like we told you at the beginning of this trial, we couldn't just stand in front of you and tell you that that's what happened. No, because in our justice, we have a burden of proof. We had to prove to you today, one, that she killed Senator Capello on the 4th of July. And second, that she did so intentionally. And that's exactly what we did. Mr. Chair, we agree. This case isn't fair to you. What this defendant decided to do on the 4th of July has changed the course of our country for good. But because this defendant thought that her voice mattered more than millions of others, because this defendant thought that they were above the law, they took somebody's life. But they're not. And that's why we're here. And we proved to you today that they killed Senator Capello by showing you 3 different things. So first, let's start with that reservation. Because members of the jury, we saw that on that reservation, she booked it on the top floor next to the emergency staircase 3 months in advance. We heard today that she used a fake name to have privacy. Members of the jury, she flew halfway across the country. Who does she need privacy? You already know that she didn't know anybody in here. It doesn't make sense, members of the jury. So next, that roof. Because we heard that an eyewitness saw them heading towards the roof on the day of the murder. We heard that on that rooftop, a cigarette butt was found to have DNA evidence, fingerprints, and gunshot residue. And it just so happens to be a coincidence that a couple feet away, there's a bullet, the same one that she used in the Army. The one that was used to kill the senator on that same day, just in the exact same spot she decided to have a smoke one day. Members of the jury, that story doesn't make sense. So lastly, the records. Because members of the jury, she admitted to you, I hold the record for farthest shot taken in the military. She's proud of it. She won it 4 separate times. We heard today from that Secret Service agent that only somebody who is trained, qualified, experienced, and skilled enough to make that shot could do it. The defense wants you to believe that that story doesn't make sense, but Who else in the immediate area who's 15 feet away from their hotel room was capable of making that shot? Follow the defendant. Because at the end of that trail, you'll find that this case is incredibly simple. But the defense says no. The defense says that there should have been more done before, during, and after. Let's talk about what was done by the defense. Because Mr. Wallace, he says that beforehand, you should have checked with his family members. She had no concerning history with any of her family members. Members of the jury, from beforehand, you can see that months in advance, she says, I don't want Senator Capello to live. This isn't concerning enough. This is what doesn't make sense. Then Mr. Wallace says that he said during there should be someone to verify the alibi. The defendant admitted, I don't know who this person is. That alibi says they're not in any photos, and I can't tell you where they were at the time of the shoot. And then afterward, when the defendant skipped town only a couple hours after the senator had been killed, she tells you she was protesting every single one of those rallies, but just so happens that I booked my flight home on the one he gets killed at. That story doesn't make sense. We met our brothers then. We showed you today that the defendant killed Senator Capello beyond a reasonable doubt, and we did that by following the defendant from the reservation to the rooftop to the records. Because when you follow the defendant, you find her guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. Defense?
Yes, Your Honor, closing argument.
Yep.
May I proceed?
You may.
Their story doesn't make sense. You see, members of the jury, the way that Mr. Walker tells this story, you'd think that Blake Crosby was the most diabolical criminal in this entire country. See, I noticed something throughout this case, members of the jury. I noticed. Prosecution, they expect you to believe that Miss Crosby was so cunning that she was able to plan and execute the assassination of a political figure without leaving a single piece of evidence behind of the preparation. Was able to hide an entire gun from the FBI and the Secret Service, but was so stupid to leave behind a cigarette with her DNA all over. To the jury, we can all see that that story just doesn't make sense. There's a reason for that. Because it's just that, a story. And you see, when the prosecution charged Blake Crosby with the crime of the century, this criminal justice system demands more of them to just tell you that story. No, they had to prove it. They had to provide you with evidence. Answer every single question to prove to you beyond any reasonable doubt that it was Miss Crosby and Miss Crosby alone who killed Thomas Capello. As the jury, they failed in that burden today. First, I want to make something very clear. Like every citizen in this nation, Blake Crosby has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. When she walked into this courtroom, she was innocent. When Mr. Walker direct examined the special agent, she was innocent, and she will leave this courtroom as such because the prosecution has failed in their burden. To help you see how their story just doesn't make sense, I want to call you back to the very beginning of today's trial. During opening statements, we asked you to consider three components of the prosecution's case. Mr. Walker has told you to follow the defendant throughout this trial, so let's do it. From before the assassination, the during, it's after. Let's start with what happened before the assassination, because members of the jury, for a moment, I want you to consider the magnitude of this crime that the prosecution is accusing Ms. Crosby of committing. The assassination of a presidential candidate from over half a mile away from her. Think about that. That's not something me or you would wake up on a random Tuesday and decide to do. No, that requires preparation. We asked the detective about what evidence they had of preparation. Members of the jury, do you remember what they said? He asked them time and time again, members of the jury, did you talk to the defendant's family? No, wasn't necessary. Did you look at their bank records to see if they bought ammunition or a sniper rifle? No. Did you at least check their phone records to see if you could verify the defendant was even on that rooftop? No. Members of the jury, they can't bring you that evidence because the special agent didn't bother to get it. Mr. Walker told you at the beginning of today's trial that we were going to ask you questions to distract you, but members of the jury, what he doesn't want to recognize is the evidence won't distract you, it will reveal the truth. This prosecution, this special agent, they didn't care about recovering evidence of what Miss Crosby could have done before. That wasn't important. It didn't matter. Members of the jury, let's turn to what happened during the shooting. Because we know where Miss Crosby was. She told us herself that she was in a rally with a crowd of people at 1:45 p.m. when that presidential candidate was shot. But the thing is, you don't have to take her word for it. When you go back and deliberate, you'll have Exhibit 18, members of the jury, the testimony from someone who saw Miss Crosby in the crowd that day. Mr. Walker told you a moment ago that that witness is not reliable. For a moment, let's compare eyewitnesses from what the prosecution did. Because when you read those statements side by side, members of the jury, you realize that both of those eyewitnesses can't be verified by other people. Both of those eyewitnesses can't be verified by video or photo evidence. Members of the jury, both those eyewitnesses are relying on their testimony and their testimony alone. So at best, a 50-50 toss-up on who's right. Was the defendant in the hotel or were they crowd? And members of the jury, when the prosecution brought you a case, a criminal charge 50-50, it's just not good enough. But you see, members of the jury, throughout this trial, they've been waving around this cigarette as some sort of smoking gun, as proof that Blake Crosby was on that rooftop. Let's think about what the cigarette actually proves. They told you that Blake Crosby's DNA was on it. Sure, they can prove to you that she smoked it. They told you that it had gunshot residue, that the cigarette was present close to the gun when it was fired. That's it. When they tell you that they have this cigarette and it proves that Blake Crosby was on that roof, members of the jury, once again, that's a guess. Guesses in this case, they just don't cut it. Well, let's turn to what happened after this crime. These members of the jury assassinating a presidential candidate, I don't have to tell you that's a serious crime. It's not something someone does and then goes home, they should run. Go to a foreign country, try to get as far away from the police, but remember what the special agent told you. Remember what the defendant told you after that assassination. They went home. They went back to work, members of the jury. I mean, they went to a local restaurant a few hours after the assassination. The prosecution wants you to believe that minutes before that, she pulled the trigger on a presidential candidate. Members of the jury, that doesn't make sense. There's a reason for it. Because their story just doesn't make sense. As a jury, there's a reason I get so worked up. It's because I, like every single person in this forum, want the person responsible for this crime behind bars. I want the person who prioritized violence over voting put in prison in that search. We cannot let the need to blame blind us from the truth. Cannot let a story that doesn't make sense mark a woman as an assassin for the rest of her life. That's why when you go back into your over deliberation, when you look at all of the evidence, members of the jury, we ask that you come back with the only verdict that justice demands, that the law supports, that this nation means a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor. When Mr. Wallace gets up here and he tells you a story, you're allowed to ask if it's reasonable. Because he got up here a moment ago and he said, a crime of this magnitude takes preparation. We heard 3 months earlier that she was booking flights, hotel rooms, and tweeting exactly what she was going to do. She wants to say that the story doesn't make sense, but I'm wondering, during that crime, how many people in this radius where the defendant says that they were qualified enough to shoot a gun, was living in that hotel that same day, left out during the shooting? Or afterwards, when that defendant lied to the government over and over and over because they thought that the truth made them look guilty. She's right. Because the truth is, members of the jury, she is guilty. Follow the defendant. Find her guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna submit our ballots and then once we get the all clear,